Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, after last week's fiery Democratic debate, all of our expectations, I think, were sky high for this one. We knew Sanders would be in the hot seat. We knew Bloomberg and his billions would continue to be a target. Perhaps Joe Biden would be challenged as a frontrunner in South Carolina. Maybe even Tom Steyer would face a difficult question. And of course, we all are united in our mystification as to why Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg are still even up on that stage. But what followed is one of the bigger disasters in modern American debates, especially because the stakes are really just so high at this point. It's part of the responsibility of a news organization to make sure a debate is actually useful to the public at the exact time when most people start to tune in for the Democratic primary. Instead of insight, we got dozens of moments like this one, where they just let the candidates endlessly talk over one another.
Mr. Steyer.
I think we're talking about
Matt. Mr. Sanders.
Let's talk about it.
Can I say something?
Look, first of all,
Bernie, let me go.
Tom, I think she was talking about my plan, not yours.
I think we were talking about math, and it doesn't take 2 hours to do the math. Because let's talk about what it adds up to.
We math.
Let's talk about math indeed. Okay, so here's the math. No, here's the math.
Excuse me, can I respond to the
doing nothing is what will happen.
Senator Sanders, you're allowed a quick response, and then we would like to allow the other candidates.
Moderator, guys.
Senator Sanders?
Moderator. Is it my turn?
This helps a lot, doesn't
you
it?
have been name-checked. You are allowed to respond.
Okay.
Oh, God. This is literally the job of a moderator, allowing candidates to actually speak and ensure an orderly transition throughout the different subjects, picking who gets to speak, how long, which person responds, etc. Now, look, I won't lie, it's a very difficult job, but that's why these people get paid the big bucks and train for it for so long. Their feelings robbed us of a substantive section of the debate when the candidates were disagreeing with one another, but were yelling so often, any meaningful moment got lost in the shuffle. And the problem, though, is that we lacked insightful moments throughout the debate because the questions were really just absolutely terrible. I mean, they asked Bernie and the rest of the stage the same goddamn question about Medicare for all. Let's relive it for the umpteenth time.
Good. Senator Sanders, the cost of your agenda. Yesterday, you released information about how you will pay for your major proposals, but not all of your details are clear. You've proposed more than $50 trillion in new spending. You've said Medicare for all will cost $30 trillion. But you can only explain how you'll pay for just about half of that. Can you do the math for the rest of us?
How many times do we need to hear this question? And Amy Klobuchar and Sanders and Buttigieg's responses. I can basically recite the answers at this point. And then they follow up that section by litigating charter schools with Michael Bloomberg. Now, look, I think charter schools are important, but they spent an inordinate amount of time on it compared to issues like, I don't know, the global pandemic that is bearing down upon the United States and which public health experts say could infect 40 to 70% of the global population. But in fact, at the CBS debate, Bloomberg and Buttigieg brought up coronavirus in their own answers to unrelated questions before CBS News even asked a question about it so late into the debate at the point when I'm certain many people were so fed up with this mess and they just turned it all off. I haven't even gotten to the crowd and how stacked it was. I'm going to leave that to Crystal. She's got a fire radar on it. But overall, I have very little political analysis to report from the debate. Pretty much seemed like a draw. The fact that it was such a mess detracted once again from our ability to have a real conversation about the many important differences of these candidates. And frankly, even any real vetting of Bernie Sanders, who is poised to become the Democratic nominee. Ultimately, it ended perfectly, with Norah O'Donnell trying to end the debate too early and accidentally with Gayle King cutting her off.
Thank you, candidates. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. That concludes our debate.
No, we have time for one more break, Nora. One more break. Time flies when you're having fun. You're watching the Democratic debate right here on CBS.
By the way, the reason they did that, they ended it right after the break. They just needed everybody to keep their eyes on the ads. It's all about money, folks.
You know, time flies when you're having fun, Saagar. Oh, God.
What a mess.
Just even rewatching those clips, it's like traumatic. It was really so, that whole debate, if you didn't watch it, you're so lucky because those are the real losers. Were all of us who had to watch that whole thing because it was just a complete mess. And you're absolutely right. It's not an easy job to be the moderator,
no, it's very hard.
When everybody wants to dogpile on Bernie Sanders and they want to get their point in, and Pete's always jumping in on top of everybody else. But that is your job, to try to make this thing something that is useful to the American public. And look, the fact that they're still asking the same questions, that the attacks are still
they're not prepared. Right.
Same attacks we've heard throughout this whole entire campaign, that you have this massive pandemic. It barely gets any attention. It's not taken seriously. I mean, it was horrible. It was a complete waste of time.
Total waste of time. And you know what they underestimated? Desperation. They underestimated the desperation of each one of the candidates.
True.
Like for Pete, this is it, right? Make or break. We're gonna finally find out the mettle of Pete Buttigieg on South Carolina, and I don't think many of us are gonna like what we see. Same with Amy Klobuchar. It's existential, and so when they're gonna be annoying, you have to be really forceful and be able to get these people to stay on topic, transition. Whenever somebody mentions so-and-so, you can be like, okay, now you respond, you get 30 seconds. It's like, and then Joe Biden was like honking about the rules the entire time. He's like, nobody lets me speak. Why do I? I was like, what? Like, what is this, right?
There's that period where Gayle King called him a gentleman.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a real shocker for somebody who goes on vacation with the Obama family to have an affinity for the former vice president.
But I mean, if we zoom out from this whole thing, which was a complete mess, look, you've got basically 3 people on the stage who have any sort of path forward. You've got Bernie, you've got Biden, and you've got Bloomberg. And anyone not named Bernie Sanders needed to upend the race in some way last night. And no one did. No one did. And look, I think Joe did enough that he's got a good shot at winning in South Carolina, like eking it out in a state where he used to lead by 50 points.
Right.
I mean, look, if you had asked us back months ago, whether it would be close in South Carolina, no, Joe Biden's got a lockdown on it. Here we are coming up against the firewall, and maybe he wins, maybe he doesn't. But ultimately, going into Super Tuesday, what does that translate into? It's days after South Carolina. Yeah. There's no time to raise more money and deploy more resources and build infrastructure and talk to voters or even to grab more ad buys. It's very difficult at this late stage in the game. So in a lot of ways, this cake is baked. They needed something dramatic to change, and nothing changed from
the real thing is, I do wonder about this, which is right now 538 has it, so about 70% chance Sanders sweeps the majority of the delegates through Super Tuesday. But that's a 30% chance. That was the chance that they gave Trump to win.
Yeah.
And the counter analysis I saw, this is a really smart thread from Nate Cohn over the New York Times, which is that the Biden performance, this is what I was thinking is the Biden performance and the Bloomberg performance, because it was a total draw. If Biden wins South Carolina, you do get a bump out of that, right? Not a lot, but you get something, which is it could put him right above that threshold of viability in order to split delegates all coming throughout. Because people need to remember, you don't get any delegates unless you win 15% of the vote. Now, you could actually have several cases like Florida, where Bloomberg, Biden, and Sanders all win 3%, or all win 15%. In California, you could have the exact same thing happen.
Yeah.
In Texas, you could have the same thing happen. I think Sanders will win Texas, but if Biden gets about 20%, new poll came out this morning showing him around a dead heat. That could be enough, I think, for him to hang on. This sets us up for the broker convention more than anything else.
And the other thing to keep our eye on that Nate Cohn and Steve Kornacki were both pointing to is the national polls look very good for Bernie Sanders. He continues to build a lead. Morning Consult that we talked about, Reuters Ipsos has him in a lead. The Hill Harris X poll here from here has him in a lead, which that's been a tough poll for him. It hasn't been a particularly good poll for him. So the national polls show him pulling away. At the same time, the Super Tuesday state polls, which some of these states aren't polled very much, and they're polled by
they're very difficult to tell.
Very difficult to tell, but you don't necessarily see the same strength for Sanders state by state in Super Tuesday states that you do nationally. Now, in California, which is the biggest, most important Super Tuesday state, you do see him jumping out to a significant lead. It's also one of the states that's been polled more extensively than most of these Super Tuesday states. But as Kyle Kondik pointed out yesterday, which is really important, last time around, the Sanders vote came in late, right? They allow mail-in ballots up to Election Day. So people can postmark their ballot, stick it in the mail on Election Day,
and
which
it will get counted.
You're going to be counting ballots for weeks to come. And so it may very well be that Bernie ends up winning California by quite a large margin, but that the media narrative coming out of the night is that he ekes out a win and that it's very close.
This is another important thing to remember, which is, look, it's a big country, all the news networks based out here on the East Coast. Everybody wants to go to bed around like 11. That's like half the country.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is that the East Coast returns are all going to come in. That's actually that's Sanders' weakest territory, right? These are states like Massachusetts, which he could lose. And then we've got Central Time that will come in, like Minnesota. Texas is going to be close. That's on Central Time. We don't know what's going to happen. Southern states, which are all better for Biden or for Bloomberg or for Bernie, and then California, which is his big ace in the hole. Not only do they take weeks, the polls close really late. Nobody's going to stay up. So the next day on cable, the narrative that's going to come out of that is however much the East Coast returns look at. And I know, look, this is a silly way, but structurally, this is just how it works, right? Like, this is how the media has to do their job with the limited information that they have. So everybody remember that whenever we see the actual returns.
I'm sure the media will be abundantly fair to Bernie Sanders, Saagar. Don't you worry about it.
I think so, too. I think they've really learned their lesson. They all came together in a circle and
That's right.
hugged. All right. I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.